here because, let me see if I can backtrack a little bit. The building committee, as you know, has been working for a couple of years. Before it was the Our Church, Our Dream Committee, then it became the building committee. Partway through, we got a grant from the National Fund for Sacred Places, which provided us with a whole lot of technical assistance about how you do a capital campaign and some help hiring an architect, design professionals, who gave us all this stuff. Nice timeline. Building was built in 1838. The world, and that's something that struck me several years ago when I realized that we were built in 1838. The world has changed since then.
A little bit.
There were no bathrooms in the church when it was built. There's no outhouse in that picture, but I'm guessing there was one. I hope there was one. This tells you a little bit about the history. Bell Tower was added in 1898. The organ moved here in 1930s. This was added in the 1960s, which is probably about the time the annex was added. And we showed up here in 2002, and some of you were here when you walked up the hill. And we restored the organ, and we just fixed the roof and the chimney, and we renovated. The office was renovated, the side yard was renovated, that was enhanced, the sanctuary was replastered, repainted. And then we got into the building assessment, feasibility studies, all this kind of stuff.
Look at how busy we've been.
We've been doing a lot of living in the last couple of years.
That's 180 years. Look at all the activity toward the end.
This is a church on the move. So, what else do I need to say? We do have a grant from Partners for Sacred Places. They are willing to match monies we raise 2-to-1, which means for every $2 we raise, they would give us $1, up to $250,000. So that's an opportunity that is before us. But the other opportunity that came our way was for Tuomi Forest and Peter and Susan these two are from Full Harvest, which was a subcontractor with Partners, came and interviewed many of you and people in the community. And sometimes, as I said earlier, outsiders can see certainly more clearly than I can see who we are, how we're perceived, what we can do. So they're here to tell us what they learned.
Great.
Welcome.
Terrific.
So last summer and fall, we and Tuomi from Partners conducted about 30 interviews with more than 30 individuals, since we talked to both individuals and couples. And that comprised of members of the church and community leaders. The purpose of the interviews was to gauge opportunities and challenges in the following areas. So we looked at getting answers to the following questions. What is the capacity of the faith and lay leadership here in this church to undertake this project, this building project, this possible capital campaign? What is the perception of Broad Bay Church by both the congregation and civic leaders? What is the gift potential of interested and committed donors, both inside the church family and outside in the community? And what is the philanthropic appeal of the proposed project? So interviews were conducted in the summer before Barba and Wheelock got involved and created the beautiful plan that you've all seen for what might happen here at the church. And some of the interviews took place after the plan was created. So that gave us a great opportunity to really hear from people both just in terms of their conceptual desire for restoration to happen here, and also to respond directly to the plan, because we showed them, the people that we interviewed, we did this in person, we showed them the plans, and for some people it was the first time they had seen them, people in the community especially, so it was great to be able to get their response. The result of the feasibility study is this 15-page report. You are all going to get a copy when you leave, and we will make sure, Nancy and John, make sure that copies are available for others who can't be here today. So we hope that everybody who wants to see a copy of this report will be able to do so, including people in the community from outside the church who were interviewed. In the meantime, we're going to give you a summary. We're not going to go through the whole report because we'd be here all afternoon. So we thought we would give you a summary of the report and then let you go home and read it at your leisure. Peter, do you want to kind of
Sure.
get into the nuts and bolts?
Yeah, indeed. We did about 20 of the interviews were internal, that is to say members of the church interviews, and at least 10 were members of the community outside. So roughly speaking, 2/3 were inside the church and 1/3 was outside, and that was very intentional. Those of you that have been part of this process for quite a while know that when the National Fund and Partners for Sacred Places makes a grant, they do so because they're trying to develop not only historic preservation, but community bonds and relationships and partnerships so that the building will continue to be a vital place of ministry and community activity. So they're deeply committed to that process of seeing it's church and community and not just church and not simply historic preservation. So first of all, let me talk a little bit about what we heard from members. And up here, in this list here, you see the priority list that the building committee and the congregation worked out prior to the feasibility study. And the feasibility study was to say, okay, out of all of these wonderful possible priorities, what are the ones that we are most familiar with and we most want to happen? Okay? And the ones that emerged for us in the interviews with the members were, first of all, people felt the absolute priority of doing structural repairs. And they're listed up here. I don't know that I need to repeat all of it, but, provide proper building drainage, repairing foundation structural issues, repairing the steeple completely, redoing sanctuary windows, some of those structural issues. And then, so those were considered to be the top priority for the majority of people that we spoke with. Now, the second priority was accessibility. And so I'm going to just keep popping up and down, aren't I? The accessibility issue really had to do both with work on the narthex and creating more of a gathering space there, and then the possibility of putting in a lift, which could be a multi-level lift, and people obviously would be able to get to the sanctuary much more easily. I'm sorry. Oh,
Right, the bottom right there shows the picture of the lift.
Oh yeah. Okay. Sorry. Thank you.
Actually, where
The lift is right here in the narthex entry. I think you're probably familiar with that. So the first priority was structural repairs. The second priority was the narthex and accessibility, especially. And then the third priority that people pointed out was community access and relationships. So how can we help this building be a place of partnership? What does that look like? A place of even more extended welcome than it is already currently. And that obviously requires not only asking ourselves here inside the walls of the church, what does that look like, but also asking people outside the church, what does that look like to them? So any questions of clarification so far before I move on to the priorities and thoughts of the members of the community? Okay, we're going to give you plenty of time for questions later. Now, it's very, very interesting to hear the responses from the people in the community. I personally speak for myself. I've been a long-time minister. I've been in the fundraising business for a long time. And it's always helpful to get the response from the community. I think this time I heard more skin in the game by community members than I can almost ever remember hearing, which I thought was really interesting. And what does that mean? What does that look like? First of all, obviously people felt this building is a historic icon, and there's a high value in this community for historic preservation. Okay, so that's one thing that people saw. Secondly, people know about for example, the music programs that are presented here in this church. They are aware of it. And I want to congratulate you on that, because that's not always the case. Even in churches where we have seen good, outreach programs, the community doesn't necessarily know anything about it. So the fact that the community knows you're doing this is a really significant piece of their awareness of you and interest in you. Many of the community members mentioned that Broad Bay is a gathering place that is open and welcoming to all. So in other words, they're hearing and understanding who you are and your mission and sense of value. That's also critically important. They're hearing they're not just seeing the building, they're not just knowing that worship happens here, they're aware that you have a vision that invites everybody, okay? And somebody in fact said the church is a core building block for the wider community, which is a wonderful comment. A core building block for the wider community. And I want you to hear that. That's a really key statement. I mentioned historic preservation. And Pastor Nancy is seen as a tremendous community asset. Yeah?
Yeah.
People couldn't say enough about her leadership, vision, ability to work with a range of people. She's viewed as visible, collaborative, and a good force in town. So kudos to the pastor of Broad Bay Congregational Church, UCC. But also the other thing that we heard is that people are aware that there is a core group of good leaders in this church, of known people are aware of that are in this church, including as we talk to people, we became aware, and other people were aware. There's some people that have some capital campaign experience. Now, one of the things that we always ask when we talk to community members, key community members, is it's lovely that you're interested. How would you like to participate in a campaign like this? And one of the things that seemed startlingly interesting to me was that there were several members out in the committee who might be willing to serve on your steering committee for this campaign.
Did you get members out in the community?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You said members in the committee. I'm like,
Sorry, out in the community, excuse me, thank you. Who might be willing to serve on the steering committee and support your efforts, especially representing the community. That's critical because, first of all, it gives you a certain gravitas in the community. Say it's not just us. We've got folks out in the community that are supporting this as well, but also it gives you access to people, to mailing lists, to donors, to all kinds of opportunities for raising money in the community. Now, so those are some of the, let me just stop and pause there for just one second. Any questions, more questions of clarification about the responses from the community? Yes, sir.
What about key members of the community?
Well, we interviewed a number of key members of the community.
I'm talking about as one to be on the committee here.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. There were several who indicated they might be willing, and others we think might be. Yeah. Now, that doesn't mean that necessarily they're going to be at every meeting, about the internal workings of the plans, but in terms of community fundraising and overall steering, they would be willing. And in fact, there are a couple of interesting things. Some interesting ideas kind of popped up from people about how they could be helpful, including putting on a community dinner to help publicize the campaign. Another person spoke about getting the Firefighters Association involved in doing activities in support of the campaign. And also people had really interesting ideas about how this space might be used for community things. And one of them, it was mentioned by two different people, I thought was really interesting. One person said, we have an issue here in Waldoboro with kids who have homework that they need to do on the computer, but they don't have Wi-Fi access at home. And so there are kids who are showing up at the library or at the school at night from their cars, or their parents are driving them over so they can do their homework, sitting in the car. What if there were a place for those kids to gather with Wi-Fi access that's safe, comfortable, they can get access to Wi-Fi, do their homework, there's some supervision. What a really interesting ministry of today to kids. So an idea, but it gives you a sense that I think how do I say this? You don't necessarily have to put tons of big equipment. It's a very simple thing. There are simple things that can be done that don't require enormous amounts of money to give access. But then that also gives you the opportunity to take a look at how is your space functioning for community and for church. How are your bathrooms functioning for community and church? How is your kitchen functioning for community and church? So gives you then the opportunity to look at these questions sort of at the next level. Now, a couple things that emerged from that seem really critical is one, to begin understanding that a possible capital campaign here is a partnership. That you're partnering with the community. You're doing for this church, but you're partnering with the community to develop something which is going to benefit everybody. And in order to do that, you're going to want to develop a pretty thoughtful and intentional communications plan that can keep key people in the community informed, such as your selectmen, for example, your planning board, key other nonprofit leaders, and other folks in town who may have access to family foundations, community foundations, things like that. And also begin to conceptualize for yourselves what a community initiative might look like here. For example, just that youth thing, or other pieces of possible activities that can be visualized here so that you can make so you can really understand the value of your project to the people that you're in partnership with. Now, and what that also means is sort of a consciousness. Not only are we in partnership, but we are in the business of creating ambassadors for this whole campaign. And an ambassador is just simply someone who is aware of what this is for and can talk to other people about it. In other words, you don't have to know everything. You just have to say, this is a key building block in our community, and we believe that the whole of Waldoboro will benefit and will develop and will grow in part because we are doing this here.
Can I just add something?
Please.
Just the feasibility study is the first step, already creating ambassadors out there.
Right.
You've already got people out there in the community who know about the feasibility study, they've seen the plans, they're interested, they're excited, and they're engaged. So that's terrific.
Right, so what I would say, the first word I would have you keep in your minds is partnership. And the second word I would have you keep in your minds is ambassadors. You're ambassadors, but we want to grow that. Everybody here is an ambassador for this church, for this project, for this campaign. And our first and foremost job is to grow the number of ambassadors. Okay? You with me on that? So Susan, you want to talk about money?
Oh, that.
She gets the good stuff.
Can I just say,
Yeah, yeah.
I've lived in Waldoboro for now going on, 25, 26 years, and I noticed in the time, I walk on Bremen Road that I live on, and then, but I drive down 32 from Augusta, and the two, quote, community centers, the West Waldoboro Community Center and the one that was up near the Cunningham Dairy Farm, both had either been sold out or no longer functioning. So clearly, the ability to have places that people can be in community for game night, for this, for that, is decreasing in this area. So that's, something that you
Interesting.
keep that in mind.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah,
And
it is
there
a very good point.
really was a lot of engagement in these conversations. And the fact that the community leaders said yes to talking to us, they spent, sometimes an hour or more with us, and they really felt, I think, invited into the conversation. That speaks well to the relationship you already have, even before we started this process, that you already have in the community. And that's one of the reasons why we feel really positive about this idea of doing a capital campaign if you decide that you want to move forward with it. So,
Yeah, let me just say one more word. The other thing that we were hearing out there is that, there's some stirrings of new economic activity in the area as well.
yeah.
And that's not something that we had heard before, but we were hearing about several younger kinds of families who had been working in the Boston area who just said, I'm not doing that anymore, and have come back to establish, begin to establish some businesses and nonprofits in this area. And that there's planned growth activity on the part of some of the nonprofits, and the gallery down here is looking at, I believe, they're creating a whole cafe out there. And, they've got a plan. It's already in the works, and so on. So there's clearly some new activity, some interest in this whole downtown area, or in the greater area here, that you can be a leader in. Just doing your good work. You don't have to do it, it's not all on you, is what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
Yeah, there was a lot of enthusiasm out there about this project. People didn't say, what, are they crazy? Nobody said that. So, bottom line, what is the gift potential and financial capacity of a capital campaign here? Well, based on the interviews that were conducted with members of the congregation and the community, and factoring in an analysis of giving here in this church, which is very much a part of how these assessments are done, both we and partners, for sake of places, recommend that the church can plan a phase 1, and I'll explain what that means, capital campaign with a goal of $750,000. So I'll just let you absorb that number. So let me talk about how these funds, where would these funds come from? They would come from pledges made by members and friends of this church and others in the community. That could be paid over a 3 to 4 year period. That's something that needs to be decided. There will be undoubtedly some upfront outright gifts or donations. Gifts and grants from individuals and foundations, and the grant from the National Fund of Sacred Places, which, as Nancy said, is set up so that if you were to raise $500,000 here with this partnership collaboration of church and community folks, partners will give you $250,000. So that's where we arrive at the number of $750,000. $500,000 would be raised in the community, and $250,000 would come from partners.
From church and community.
And in that $500,000 number, there's a $60,000 Steeples Fund grant that's available as well. So that comes out of the $500,000.
Yes, it does.
Good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, one of the obviously the National Fund is a great leverage for raising money in the community, because they can see that there's there are other significant players in this, and that anything that they contribute is going to be matched by what the National Fund can do. So there's some pretty strong indicators that you can go out to the community and raise some money in the community.
How much out of the 500,000 would come from foundations?
It's really hard to tell. I can tell you that the what we see over time is about 20%. But some places it's 5% and some places it's 40%. So I can average it, but it's not necessarily going to be a predictor. We can say that probably the National Fund will help you leverage some money from some foundations. They're probably not going to be big contributions from those foundations. Most of them are probably going to be in the lower level, the $5,000 level, that sort of thing. There are some significant people out there in the community who have the capacity for substantial contributions if they're interested, and that have already been identified, I should say. If I were to take a wild guess, I would say 20% is a good place to shoot for.
One of the opportunities for grants from foundations comes from programmatic initiatives. They don't tend to fund bricks and mortar work in churches typically, but they will fund, and they get very interested when there's a program that gets involved with bricks and mortar restoration. So that's why we were interested in listening to people's suggestions for what you might be able to do here programmatically, maybe to expand on what you're already doing with, like, say, the music program, or this idea of an after-school program. It's really up to you to decide what feels right for you.
Right.
But these are just ideas. But we have seen foundations get excited about funding those kinds of programs, including basically helping to pay for some of the changes in the building that relate to that program. So they do fund bricks and mortars, but you kind of have to go in the back door and tie it to a program, if that makes sense. And since we don't know what you might do, if anything, yet, we really can't estimate that. But they're out there.
One should begin with the premise, you're offering it, we'll take it.
Absolutely.
Find a way to take it.
Yeah. When I first began fundraising many years ago, I was working for a seminary. We got a substantial gift from a person of mixed reputation, and so I said, I don't know about tainted money. I was just sort of asking the question, and my boss said, well, how do you say it? Maybe tainted, but taint enough.
We're for sale, but we go for top dollar.
Yeah.
So let me just finish what I was saying about the financial piece. As you know, this expanded project that Barba and Wheelock has been working with you on has an estimated cost of around $1.7 million, at least as far as we know right now. So the vision for this would be phase 1, $750,000. You need to decide what projects you want to do for that phase. And then subsequent phases or significant dollars could be raised in another capital campaign down the road, and or the possibility of using bequests that come into the church over time, as long as they're not designated not to be used for capital purposes, to do some of these projects that way. So there are other ways to fill that gap, but it will take some time. Questions about the dollars?
I guess my question was, and I tried to read the bits of the report that I saw, and I was a little confused. So the priority list, the structural stuff, was there an estimate of how much that would cost? I mean, if we do a phase 1, does it not quite cover, do we have like, 3 legs on the chair, or does it cover the whole first bit of priority?
Well,
Yeah.
according to this up here, But this is just your initial plan, and you would have to go through it again to decide which structural repairs are the most important and which of the other pieces are most important. But you know, you have a description here of the initial take of about $385,000 for structural repairs here, followed by some sanctuary egress. The narthex work in accessibility, another $226,000. So it eats up $750 very quickly, because you also have expenses. You have your architect expense for fundraising consultant, perhaps a project manager, who knows. So
A note on that, the architect expenses are actually included in those.
they are,
Yeah,
okay, good.
they included the soft costs. And then interestingly, as the building committee, we looked at, you know, what is $750, because they have presented these numbers to us as sort of as a preview. It does take care of priorities 1, 2, and 3, which is all of the structural issues, exiting out of the sanctuary, and all of the narthex work. Plus, there's about another $100,000 that would, if we would raise that much, would be available, and it could be used towards some of the other things that we could figure out, whether it's more developing of the exit way out, or doing some work down here in the fellowship hall and the kitchen and so on. So we could look at that.
That's the part, Brian, though, that could be tied to programmatic.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
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 Exactly. What other questions or wonderings or concerns? It's okay to say it scares the dickens out of me.
Why not?
Well, it doesn't sound like such doom and gloom as it did in the beginning.
Well, there you go. Exactly. You know, there
Yeah.
is a phase of this that is for every church that is sort of the deer in the headlights phase. You know, we can't do this phase. And I remember that we did a campaign not very far from here, up in Belfast, and in the beginning, the first thing they told us is that we live in the poorest county in Maine. That was the first thing they said, and we can't do this. Well, they raised $878,000. You know, that's a chunk of change in my book, in the poorest county in Maine.
Towards that.
Yeah. So.
There's a challenge.
Yeah, so I was interested in your comment about the other stuff going on in the community. So it's probably a good time to take a look at these projects, because you can build off some of that energy. And it might be good to get some awareness, more specifically, of what actually is going on. So there's a context when you're raising these funds. We had a meeting a while ago with Nancy with the Waldoboro Theater, which is also busy, and they're still busy, Nancy. And I'm supposed to meet with them, I think, this week to find out where they stand. They've now completed their case statement and so forth. So the good news is there are efforts around going on like that to improve buildings and deal with programming. Part of the skittishness, or not so good news, is there are others
That's correct.
that are looking to raise money.
Yes, we did hear that. And,
Yes.
and what we also heard was that there were no specific timeframes attached to those possible campaigns, the library and the theater, and we were told, quote, go for it. So people were saying, if you guys are really serious about this and you want to do it, our suggestion is do it now.
Right.
Don't wait.
Don't wait.
And the other thing that that we would say that this potential gift from the National Fund, which you've already got, it's yours to receive if you raise a certain amount of money, is a huge blessing as it attracts interest, excitement, and confidence. So without that, we would probably be having different conversations. Not just because of the amount of money that you will potentially get, but because of the level of confidence that it symbolizes, that you were chosen to receive that money out of churches all over the country on the basis of who you already are and who this community already is.
Is there a time frame that relates to that?
Yes.
What's that?
Refresh my memory. I believe it's 2 years. What the time frame for the?
To do the campaign.
Yeah.
I don't.
To receive that, to
remember.
receive that one.
I don't.
There is a time frame.
I don't. There is. I don't. There is. I don't remember. But I think the point is to get it off the ground.
Yeah, yeah.
The point is to get it off the ground.
I think that if you are doing your diligence and taking the steps, the National Fund is willing to support and be patient. So it's not like there is any kind of real, sense of emergency, have
Right.
to do this right this minute. But they want to see forward movement, and they want to see a commitment, a vote to commit to move forward.
Yeah, they have been gently nudging us and
Yeah.
and hopeful for us to continue. But it's entirely our choice. But they've been very good and supportive.
Yep.
But they're back there.
Yeah.
General pressure.
You're right.
We're also in the community just off a hospital drive for a sizable building. And we're also, with a Y, large expansion. There's a lot of bricks and mortars, and I don't know how they made out because they both kind of landed at the same time. I don't know how, it's been for them in terms of what they expected, anticipated, and what the results
I don't
were.
remember. Their campaigns are done. Is my recollection. Their campaigns are already done, though. Isn't that right?
Now they are.
Yes, they're in.
I think,
Right.
I'm not sure the Wise campaign,
Mm-hmm.
as in anything, you come with money, they're gonna take it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think for the most part, the major effort is gone.
Is done. Yeah, our feeling from what we heard, and I'm echoing what you're just saying, is that there have been campaigns in the area which are pretty much done. There are other campaigns that are on the books. You've got a kind of a moment here, when you can be the campaign in the community. So we want you to be deliberate about what you do, but deliberate with a sense of appropriate urgency.
Mm-hmm.
What other questions? All right, certainly the next step from our point of view, and I'm not telling anything you don't already know, is before you can come to a vote on a campaign as a congregation, you need to know what do we get for $750,000. So you need to have a plan and a way of presenting to yourselves and to the community the case, as you mentioned, before you come to a vote. So we hope that that's something that you can do with reasonable speed, and then make your own decision about moving forward, understanding both what you're getting yourselves into and also what you're going to get out of it.
Don't you think that when something is going on here, that it creates enthusiasm
Absolutely.
all around the town?
Absolutely, no
Yeah.
question. You'll find that the more you're able yourselves, just in ordinary conversation, to be creating ambassadors, just talk about it, you will be part of the buzz, and you will start getting a lot of feedback from people, and they will be interested to hear more. We had an interesting sort of the other end of the spectrum experience with a church outside of Boston. Very dedicated church, half UCC, half something else. When we talked to the community people, the only thing that the community knew that they did is they sold pumpkins in October. It's the only thing they knew. They did lots of good things, but nobody knew about them. And so in order for them to do the campaign, they've got to get past that barrier of, people knowing what they do. So, you may be learning to be evangelists in a whole new way here as you begin to really step out into the possibility. But you're absolutely right. As the project comes clear, as the partnerships come clear, you're going to see excitement happen in the community.
Right.
Yeah.
I would bring up a comment, and that is, I'm relatively new, I'm not actually a member, but I know that I save my order of service at the end of the week because I realize I'm not gonna remember what's gonna happen if I don't have that, because, and it is difficult to maintain an online calendar, etc. But I'm thinking maybe we need to, print up a few, and maybe with people with home printers, a few, these are some of the things that are coming up each month, so that like people like me, I just don't remember it. If I don't have it in front of me, and even not even on my iPad, but just like if I have a piece of paper that says these things are coming up, then I'll know to talk about them with other people, because I don't even know all the things that this church does. I just, like I said, I went to the Unitarian Church in Augusta for years, and I don't really know what we do here, but clearly there's a lot, and I'm just ignorant of it. So, but I would love to know about it, and I'd be happy to talk about it.
That's a great point. That's a really important point. One of the things that we hope can be developed, and we're happy to help you do this, is a very simple set of talking points. These are the important points that you want to have, including your conversation. Just ordinary conversation, but make sure you say these things, because these are the things that we want people to remember. As you will hear me say over and over again, when I first got out of college, I went into business, and I was in the marketing department of a large company, and my boss said that if you want to get one message across to 2/3 of your constituency, mind you, this is back in the dark ages when I was young. If you want to get one message to 2/3 of your constituency, you have to tell them 6 entirely different ways. It's different forms. Same message, 6 different ways. We talk to marketing people today, they say 12 different ways to get one message to only 2/3 of the people you think you're supposed to be talking to. So one of the things that we would work with you if we were to continue with you is talking points. Just how do you talk about it, and what do we need to remember to say? Sort of thing you can simply pin on the refrigerator. Not lists like this, lists like everybody can remember.
And report back.
Oh yeah,
And report back, put it in the plate on Sunday morning or whatever.
great idea. And if you have some response, put it in the plate on Sunday. Absolutely, what a great idea.
Maybe we could speak in parables.
Yeah, there you go. I like it. I like it. Well, you are. Once you're talking programs and ideas, you're talking parables of community and partnership.
We
Absolutely.
confuse enough people in the pulpit for that stuff.
I wanted to ask you if I could, did you interview anybody at the town?
We didn't, but I believe Tuomi did.
Okay, so is the list of who you interviewed publicly available, or is that part of the?
Well, we can certainly, you have the list of who we interviewed. I don't have the list that Tuomi interviewed. I know a couple of, I know several of
Can
them.
that list be available to
Sure.
I think that would come through the steering committee.
Sure.
There were 2
Yeah.
members of the select board that were interviewed.
And so
Right.
did you talk to the other churches in the area?
I did not.
Did anyone?
I did not. I don't know
I don't
whether
know if
Tommy
Tuomi
did.
did or not.
There were certainly some of the community members that were interviewed are members of other churches, but I don't think there was an
Correct.
official
That's true.
link.
That's right.
As long as we're just talking, did the selectmen include Jen Lindsay and Bob Butler?
Yes.
Yes, okay,
That's 2.
yeah.
Yes.
I have a question. It's very reassuring to hear what the vision of this church is from outside of our congregation itself. What I find a little disturbing is that we don't, in our worship particularly, we don't grow in terms of those community members coming.
Okay, thank you for bringing that up. That's a really important question, because it's a lot bigger than us sitting here. The reality is, for churches like us, like all of us here, is that most of our, not all, but most of our churches are not growing in the traditional sense of the term, but are growing in terms of their program and impact on the community and partnership with the community. And so there's an entirely different model of church that's emerging that has many different ways in which the worship and prayer life of the church touches the community through its programs and through its partnerships in the community. You would be amazed how many people will say that they are sort of a member of, because they have these contacts and feel, that they belong in a way, even if they're not official members. So our experience is that a project like this will increase your number of contacts and people who feel like their hearts are with you, even though it may not increase the number of people who sign the membership book. And may not dramatically increase the number of people who come on Sunday. What you will see is an increase of people who are crossing the threshold over 7 days a week. That's kind of where a lot of church life is today, and I think it's actually a pretty amazing model.
And people who are willing to contribute to a capital campaign for the church, even though they aren't officially members, they have an emotional connection here because they've had a life event here, or they've been to an event here at some point that left an impression on them. And the other thing that we heard from a couple of people, and I think Tuomi heard this also, which was very interesting, is that people were saying that I don't want to make comparisons, but so excuse this, but of all the churches that they could think of, this one seems to feel the most ecumenical, the most open to people who aren't church people, or to people who might consider themselves members of another religion, that this is a church where people can walk in the door and feel welcomed. And so we heard that message a number of times, and that's a really good place to be, not only just because it's a good place to be, but it's also a good environment for going out and asking people if they would like to contribute to a capital campaign at a church.
And of course, we're right next door to the funeral parlor.
Well, it does. I mean,
No
that's
question.
one of the ways that people have connection with this
That's right.
church. And that matters to people.
Oh, yes.
There are a lot of people.
Right up to it.
Absolutely, there are a lot of people
That's the old plan.
whose connections are through weddings, funerals, all kinds of things like that. Yes.
I think it's important for us to reach out to young families, because right now they're so busy they don't know what to do.
That's true.
Because they're working, their sports, they
That's right.
only have this small little window.
And so your connections with them are quite different than
Right.
than they looked when I was a kid, for
Right.
example.
I got a whole family that I can't get to come because they only have a little bit of Sunday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so they may have other ways in which they connect.
I'm just wondering if Nancy, John, and anybody on the building team has anything else to add about your response to something in the feasibility study that you felt was important that we might not have touched on?
I think the question that had come up and you had answered it in a phone call that we had with you is how does what we're about to embark on, other than the things that you said that are unique and special about us, compare with others? What's our matrix that you can explain in terms of how successful we might be compared to where you've seen others?
You mean in terms of the financial capacity?
Yeah, like it seems like we're at a good starting place, and
Yes.
now is the time. You said that.
Yes.
Is there anything else that you want to, share with us in your experience that you've encountered with others, where we sort of line up with them?
Yeah, I think that one of the things, I think we've already said it, but we'll say it again, is that I think that you're in a good place to make your case statement. Because you have a sense of who you are in the community. It needs to be communicated. It needs to be refined so that it can be communicated. But you have a pretty strong awareness of who you are as a congregation, and you're hearing back from the community saying, yeah, that's who you are from our point of view too. So that you're believable when you say, we would like to do X program or Y idea, because you already have touched people in those ways. And so you already have a trust base for people to hear your message. A lot of congregations, like the one I mentioned, down outside of Boston, great things they do, but nobody knows. So they have to establish all of that all over again in their communications.
So it kind of tied to this is, I guess, just kind of a nosy question. Like, how did they build that humongous thing up behind Moody's? Because they didn't build just one huge building; they built a second huge building. How did they do that? So how did they do that? That's my question. Yeah. So I mean,
But it's a very different model of church.
But and the other thing that doesn't seem like it makes much of a difference, but being in a hospital now that is visible from the hallway, is very different from being in two hospitals in Augusta and Waterville that you had to drive a good 5-minute drive down through the goat path to get to the hospital. It has definitely made us, boom, ambulances can come there, people know it's there, they see it from the highway. We're not visible because people don't go by this
Right.
anymore in Route 1. And so again, there's no real way for us to have, I don't know, maybe we can have 3 billboards in Waldoboro about, I don't know.
Exactly.
Yeah, maybe we need to
Why
have,
not imagine?
yeah,
Absolutely.
stuff like that.
Why not imagine?
Yeah.
There isn't anybody else like you.
Mm-hmm.
So talk about it,
One of the other things that I am wondering about is that our actual physical location is in Waldoboro, but what did you all consider as our community? Because I know that a number of us who are here don't live in Waldoboro.
And not all of the community people live in Waldoboro either.
Okay.
There's
so-
one that even that lives in Philadelphia.
Okay.
So
But
So are you so I guess what you're saying, are we like Waldoboro, Jefferson, Friendship?
well, I think the building committee can probably, the steering committee can probably answer that better than we can.
The answer is yes.
Mhm.
Yes.
yeah.
We're,
I mean, I
we're
think
going
that-
from Rockland to Jefferson to Damascata to, it's a
Right.
wide range.
It is.
In the fundraising training that we got with partners in January of 2017, it touched on everything, like in your, get your congregants, of course, on board, but you want to talk to your diaspora, like people like my mother, who
Right.
was a loving member of this church, who lives in Atlanta,
Right.
Georgia, so you got to get them, and then we're definitely, I think from my perspective on the building committee, looking at the summer folk that come up here on the river.
Absolutely.
We're gonna, any town who, like Jefferson and Thomaston, any town whose members are coming here, we wanna be in those communities as well somehow, and so yeah, I think the mid-coast, it might be a little bit big, for us, but it's bigger than just Waldoboro for sure.
I think that's the mindset we have to get rid of, really, as far as just being us and get out there.
Yeah, that's not the way we do church here.
No, I get it.
But I think the Baptists did it. They do church amongst themselves, and I think they have a big enough community members in their congregation that they made that project happen.
They're known for their tithing as well. And if we tithed, you'd see a different figure too than we've been discussing.
Well, you'd be
Oh,
amazed.
that's
I mean,
true.
capital
They
cam-
did it, I love it.
capital campaigns are different than annual fundraising and annual stewardship campaign because, and the reason for it is that in a capital campaign, about 70% of the dollars in a capital campaign come from about 30% of the people. And those 70% of the dollars tend to come from assets, not from income. So a lot of the money in a capital campaign comes from assets that people are willing to contribute to your campaign and to your project. Now, asset can be, savings, it can be retirement money, it can be investments, stocks, it can even be real property. We've seen, physical property donated. We've seen
Summer cottages,
paintings, things that have actual marketable value and no liens against them.
These things have to be liquidated, by the way. We don't want people to be bringing the painting to the church and saying, here, you guys sell it. It has to be liquidated, the property has to be sold. It has to be a reasonable idea, but absolutely, if somebody wants to contribute, we even heard of a guy who cut down the woodlot around his house, which was just a little trailer, and he didn't have much money, but he cut down the woodlot, came up with $30,000 to give to his church capital campaign.
Wow. So the money comes from strange places.
Yeah.
And every campaign that we have seen, there are some surprises. In a good campaign, there are surprises. And especially in New England, because in New England we think we don't flaunt our money. And we don't, because we're New England. But that doesn't mean it's not there. And when people feel like there's a good cause in New England, they can be incredibly generous.
I think it's interesting too, you were mentioning about our visibility, that we're not on one, but some of the things that I had heard and we heard in the committee as we were sort of preparing for the partners and this part here, is that we are kind of a landmark in downtown Waldoboro. I mean, when there's the paint the town, a lot of people paint the church, and we're sort of in this little triangle of activity here too, especially with the Waldo Theater thinking about doing what they're doing, the library, you know.
The gallery.
There's back and forth going on right now with the community center, what's going to happen to 80th grade school, and articles in the Lincoln County paper mentioned this project in that. Somebody already knows.
Right.
We haven't really put out the real message yet, and we don't certainly know whether we're doing a capital campaign, but some people already know that we're thinking about something.
Exactly. You're part of the
So,
town buzz.
yes.
So
There's
you're
a
in
letter
the
to
buzz.
the editor.
Yeah.
What was it?
I think there was a letter to the editor a couple weeks ago. A couple months ago maybe.
You send in 2 articles, and one is about church, that's a feature.
Interesting. And which newspaper is that?
Lincoln County.
Lincoln County?
Would it be helpful to talk?
What kind of help can we expect to have from a capital
I'm sorry, what kind of what?
What kind of help can we expect
Well,
to
that's
have in a capital campaign?
that's for you to decide. As a company, we have put a proposal to be your capital campaign consultants, and that has a whole list of the things that we do, everything from training to helping you with your case. There's a whole helping you think through foundation grants, training you how to ask for money, how to do a communications plan, how to follow through in a communications plan, how to do events. There's just a ton of stuff that's wrapped up in the package.
Everything that is involved.
Soup to nuts.
You would have support on. So that's something that is part of what the congregation needs to look at in the context of doing the capital campaign.
We're doing a campaign in Vermont right now in the Burlington area at UCC Church. And we said the same thing, that soup to nuts, and we'll do whatever we can. I was noticing in my email, we have 400 email threads in there from that one congregation and stuff, but I'm not sure that we actually bargained for how much we were going to be doing.
Can I ask you to take your company hat off for a minute? It may not be fair. If so, just tell me. They're used to telling me that anyway. If you were to try to make that decision, we come to you, say you've already started, you have experience, you know the material, you don't have to catch up. Or does it help to say, gee, we need fresh eyes, and you're going to provide that to me somehow? Which is the better?
Well, that's first of all, that's your decision. That's not up to us, that's your decision. And sometimes congregations do a due diligence and get 3 interviews even after the feasibility study. I'll give you my honest opinion, and that is that you can certainly do that, and we support you in doing that. You've got some time, it takes time to do that. And if you want to move forward, you may wish to use us, and you already know who you are. Yeah, I mean, frankly, fundraising is not rocket science. There are other people out there who offer what we do. Some are more expensive, a lot more expensive, and some are less expensive. But they offer more or less what we have to offer.
What we have found is that sometimes fundraising consultants don't want to work with a client unless they've done the feasibility study also for the consistency that allows them in terms of really understanding the community, having already met so many people, begun to build relationships. All of that is really an important part of the process from our point of view. So if someone asks us to come in and consult with them after someone else has done the feasibility study, we would generally say, no, I'm sorry, we can't do that. It's not that we want all the business, it's just that it's really hard to come in and start working with a process that someone else has started and laugh.
Right.
It can be done, but it's just, it adds an extra challenge, I think.
Would it be helpful for me to outline what I think the process is for Broadway at this
Yeah.
point?
Absolutely.
So I'm gonna need help because I don't have notes, but we're doing this today. The building committee is going to meet with Peter and Susan this afternoon. And the building committee is working on a call to a meeting that will outline in general terms what we would do to the church, in general term, is likely to agree to. A number of how much money we think we're gonna try to raise, what we can do with that money if we raise it, and to think through as best we can the costs of a capital campaign, both financial and in terms of time. And I know we've got more questions for Peter and Susan in terms of both in cost dollars and in terms of time. And the hope is, if we can get all that done, a proposal would go to council for their March meeting, and there would be a call to a meeting that would go out for April something or other. I can't remember the exact date.
The
But-
Sunday after Easter.
Sunday after Easter, okay, April 8th then. So the hope is that we can move quickly. And if we are able to move quickly, these folks tell us, I think, that we're at a point where we could do a capital campaign and it doesn't need to take years.
Right.
It can take months.
Right.
So if we decide to move, this is what I think we're doing. If we decide to move, we can meet on April 8th and say, let's move and get to work. The thought of it exhausts and excites me. And have this thing wrapped up in 2018, the capital campaign piece. That's a hope. It may or may not be realistic, subject to change without notice, as things happen. But we as a church have been talking for quite a while. Peter and Susan said earlier, the community is saying go for it. We've done an awful lot of work. We've got people in the community who are asking me, well, what's happening? And just as an aside, in the past week, Restorative Justice did a circle here for a young offender from Waldoboro that they were really excited about. Art and Scripture did art. We did a memorial service. We're here today. There's probably something else that I've missed. We just, AA was here. We just had an inquiry about the space upstairs being used for a recital for April. And would their folk group like to come and do a thing? Or could we host their folk group?
And we've got the belly dancers.
And we've got what?
The belly dancers.
Oh yeah, I forgot that. We've got belly dancers who want to come in here. You can't make this stuff up. So,
My daughter-in-law said she would do a yoga class here too.
There you go.
your daughter-in-law is a great yoga teacher. The belly dancer too is a great teacher. I've had direct experience of her too.
I know, we always giggle about that, but it is exercise.
It is, no kidding.
It's hard.
It's hard, yeah. So that's where I think we're going. Any other building committee, did I sort of outline that right? I'm excited. I'm so excited about what Peter and Susan have done and what Partners has done in terms of helping us walk through this. And I think that the building committee deserves huge applause for
Amen.
what that they have
Amen.
done. And I'm looking at Marianne, John, Kathy, and Brian, and Joe, who is not here, and Linda, who is not here. It's
And we would welcome more people to be.
and this is an all hands on deck project. Should we choose to do it? So, any closing questions, comments, Bob?
I just want to make one caution, and that is you didn't say when you went down your list, the personnel cost. We often comment here in these kinds of meetings in our church about the lack of leadership numbers, not talent. You got that
Yeah.
beautifully covered. I think we don't often calculate, we have boards without full complements and whatnot.
Could-
And that's been so for a long time.
Can I address that question?
Yeah.
Thank you for bringing it up. That's a really important point. One of the really interesting things about capital campaigns and volunteering for capital campaigns is that they are task-specific and time-specific. So that when you're asked to do something for a capital campaign, you know what your job description is, and you know when it ends, and you get a product. And you don't have to serve on a committee for 3 years. And so we find that that it's actually fairly easy to recruit people for a capital campaign, and there are tasks. Some of them take 2 weeks, some of them take 6 months, and everything in between. And so people can find their own comfort level, and as a result, we find that new leadership emerges because of
You've
the
been in the
capital
church long
campaign.
enough to know how often does that happen.
Every capital campaign we've worked on, every single one.
And every church we
I
talk
mean-
to has a problem with not enough people to do
Right.
all the work. So it's not just here, it's every single church, and yet they do manage to raise enough people, to bring enough people together to do the capital campaign.
I shall ascend the high altar for you.
Thank you.
Oh, you're
If the theater starts going, we can start having,
Bob, I've already said to council that we're gonna have to really look at what we're doing. And there may be some things that we need to drop back on. And I think I'm just curious about this, that last year we did not do a plant sale, we did not do a service auction. The budget was tight, but we did a whole lot of other things. And I think we gotta pay attention to where we're using our labor, cause sometimes we are not always as efficient
That'd be very healthy.
as I
Yeah.
would like.
Right.
That's important.
Yep, that is important.
Anything else?
Let's go for it.
There you go. Go for it.
No more talking.
Thank you, everybody.
A lot more
I
time.
appreciate it.